Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, a place where industry experts and business leaders share their road to success, startup stories, and how technology has transformed their business, their life, and even world. Now, according to a recent Gartner study, diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of the top 5 business priorities for businesses in 2022. However, today I want to talk about how hybrid and in-person working environments could actually be jeopardizing companies' access to talent. So while more organizations are doubling down on diversity and inclusion efforts and implementing consequential reporting, meeting all these goals still remains a challenge for many corporations. And one way to increase the diversity in an organisation is to provide opportunities for growth from the very entry level of the employee sector. And by that, I mean remote internship programs that allow employers to access diverse talent pools and fill their future hiring pipeline. And this is a topic that today's guest, Ahva Sadeghi, is incredibly passionate about at Symba. So I invited her on the podcast today to share her inspirational story that actually began with a pivot, but what shortly followed was a global pandemic that meant some of the biggest names in tech, such as IBM, came knocking as the world collectively reached an epiphany on the value of remote internship programs. So we have a lot to get through, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the US, where you can join the conversation with me. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here, Neil. My name is Ahva Sadeghi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Symba. We are a women-founded tech startup focused on designing the future of work with early talent programs and remote internships.
Fantastic. And I'm excited to dive a little bit deeper into this topic with you today. But before we do, I know you've listened to the show before, so you know what's going to be coming next. But I always like to begin by taking my guests back in time. So can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or the moment that would put you on the path that you're on today, and ultimately share your origin story with me?
Absolutely. I think it's such a unique time to also share my origin story with you because of what's happening in the world. I'm a first-generation Iranian American, and I was actually working at State Department on the Iran desk doing research on human rights. But my path there was through a remote internship. And I quickly realized that remote work could be a vehicle and access to more opportunities. And I got really excited about using tech to make a larger impact. I was writing reports that I realized very few people were reading at State Department, and I wanted to do something much bigger, much bolder. So at the time I was at State Department, I pitched to the team that I did the remote internship, asking them if we could design a platform on the back end to facilitate these programs so that we could scale this and make this bigger. And so at the time I applied to a pitch competition using this concept of remote internships. I got a little bit of funding. And at that moment, I had the exciting itch and I left my full-time job to work on Symba. And this is back in about 2017. So well before the whole world went remote. And people thought we were kind of crazy about doing this remote internship concept. But I really believe in the power of technology for good. And that's what my lens is here.
And who are the crazy ones now, right? 20 years later.
Still a little crazy, you gotta be.
But of course, it was that path that would lead you to Symba, which is an award-winning and women-focused tech startup using technology to democratize access to the workplace through internships and apprenticeships. It's incredible what you're doing here, and it's a big reason I invited you on the podcast today. But can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind the company? And also, of course, the problems that you set out to solve with technology and in the tech industry.
Absolutely. And I should have noted this earlier, but as I was working on this project, I was fortunate to do a fellowship with late Congressman John Lewis in Atlanta. And so that was really the experience where the project came to life, where the technology and the experimentation started to happen. And so that experience was incredibly powerful for getting it launched, getting it off the ground, and working with an incredible leader who promoted technology, who promoted innovation. He brought 20 fellows from around the world to participate. And the first step into actually executing on Symba was building a team. Getting people to be bought in without any sense of capital. And so from there, we started to do a lot of pilots. We started to pitch to different talent leaders and do a lot of research, understanding, is this viable? Are we creating something that people need? Is this a vitamin? Is this a painkiller? And we started to do a lot of testing. And that's kind of, I think, our whole mentality of building at Symba is, how do we experiment? How do we fail fast, but move forward quickly? And so when we ask about how this started to become realized, we started to see a lot of traction. But then I'll be very candid with you, in 2020, when the whole world went remote, that was the moment where we were sitting at the perfect moment when the market had a massive demand for something that we had built. And we kind of exploded. We took off. My co-founder and I were sitting in our desks. We weren't even paying ourselves, and we had 38 inbound demos from the likes of like IBM and Dell and really big name companies. We're like, how do we even take these meetings on? So it was, crazy shift in the world, but, being at the right place at the right time with the right solution, that's kind of how we stepped up in the world, trying to help companies take their programs remote during that time.
Can you still remember that moment? Because on behalf of every startup founder listening all over the world, and everybody sat in that position wondering if they've got something real here, something that the world wants, and you can solve real problems for them. And the problem, of course, is getting everybody interested, getting everybody buying, increasing that adoption. And for sometimes you can sit there and it's not quite working out. And then almost overnight, I mean, you've done a lot of work beforehand, this old 10 years overnight success story, I know, but that particular moment when everything changes, do you still have to pinch yourself sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was such a wild experience for us because we were in Techstars at the time, and we had a lot of pushback, and people were not really buying into this idea of remote internships. So we were in the midst of a pivot. We were like, we're going to put this product to rest, and we're going to work on this recruiting engine because we've already built a really powerful network and name and already have capital to power what we're doing. So we were in the midst of a pivot. And then all of a sudden, the demand for something we thought we were going to put to rest and never use again, came out of the ashes, and we were like, this is what we were selling and building, and really working very quickly to execute on building a customer success team. So yes, I think we had to pinch ourselves. We couldn't even believe what we were seeing in the news that, a month ago, people were saying internships will never happen remotely. And then all of a sudden they all had to happen remotely. Like, it was nothing you could have ever predicted.
It's such an incredible story and so inspiring. And I've spoke to something like 2,100 people on here, and I'm always curious on those magic moments that happen. And very often it seems that, I don't know, you're not in particular lost, but you know when to pivot and you know when to make that move. But equally, the universe almost gives everybody that little nudge in the right direction just to say, no, this is, you are on the right track. Is that something you'd ever seen before? Or was it, because it's just mind blowing what happened there, isn't it?
I know. I think that, our approach to seeing the way that we kind of supported was almost like we tried to be a solution in a really difficult time, right? We think about what happened to the whole world that time going remote. It was very challenging. It wasn't easy. Being able to go remote is a privilege in a lot of ways, right? Frontline workers had to still be, working, whether it was with patients or other aspects of the different, types of workplace, jobs that we have. So I think it really was a privilege. But I think what I've seen with founders, and we see so much research about it, is it's a sense of grit, right? Yeah. What we see on the outside is everyone sees, oh my God, wow, you're crushing it all the time. Everything's always going your way. It's like, no, I'm really knocking on 1 million doors and then one of them opens, right? And I think that's the approach, is that I constantly get up every time I fall. I fall a lot, and my PR team doesn't show all the falls, right? And so I think that's what happens is that, as I'm climbing up and doing a marathon on the mountain, I grab a lot of rocks that, the fall, but the ones that I do grab on, I still keep going. So I think that's the key is like, you will fall and be okay with falling. Let those, wounds heal and keep on going.
Amazing story. And before you came on the podcast today, I was also reading a recent Gartner study that said that diversity, equity, inclusion is one of the top 5 businesses, or one of the top 5 business priorities for businesses this year. And it shows that there's so much progress being made, but so much more to be done as well. But can you tell me more about how hybrid and in-person working environments could actually be jeopardizing companies' access to talent? Because again, you're right in the heart of this space. So what are you seeing there?
Absolutely. And we're thrilled to see that this is a top priority because it has so many benefits, business benefits. Just for society and in general, making sure that we have a diverse workforce. And as far as, jeopardizing, access, whether it's in person or hybrid, it's really, really critical for organizations to be flexible, right? And some can be more flexible than others, right? If you are, an organization that you require your team to be in person, you're a frontline worker, that is a different story. But like I said earlier, it is a privilege to be able to go remote. And so creating inclusion, when we talk about D&I, it's not just about diversity, it's also about creating inclusion. And so it is challenging to create inclusion in hybrid realms. There's actually research coming out that individuals who come in person are more likely to be promoted much quicker than those who are fully remote. So by making sure that you have inclusion in your remote space, that is a really critical thing to approach. And then if you're not flexible, then you really can't recruit from all realms of United States and internationally. When you think about accessing talent in rural spaces, when you think about accessing talent really everywhere else, you're opening up your workforce, and then you're ensuring that you can access diverse talent. So there's a whole host of things that come with that, as I mentioned, inclusion and other aspects, but definitely being flexible, being open to new types of workplaces helps your team be resilient and endure for the future. Those are the teams who are going to be successful in the long run for sure.
100% with you on that. And I suppose the big question is how can businesses increase diversity to provide growth opportunities from that entry level of employee sector? And how will technology make that process easier? Because we are in a situation at the moment, over the last 3 years, where many people have been recruited online, onboarded online, and for a long period of time, they've not even met their colleagues or the person that would usually sit next to them. So I'm curious on how you see that whole process being made easier and for the right reasons too.
That is such a great question. And we're living in such a fascinating time in the world of HR and recruitment. As you said, we built our whole team remotely. So the idea of, even having one office or one location is just impossible now because we really scaled during this time. So it is a really fascinating time for companies to become more proactive. Take a step back and don't, especially if you're a smaller scale team. I know a lot of founders listen to your podcast. Think proactively. Don't just let anyone join your workforce. Think about what is the culture, what is the vision, what is the makeup of your workforce? What do you want it to be in 5 years, in 10 years? And how are you going to get there? Because you can reverse engineer what are the places you are going to recruit from? Are these networks of diverse candidates? Are these your board and your mentors? How are they helping you? And how are you being thoughtful during your interview process? So by not being so reactive and being like, yes, they fit the bill, that's the candidate, actually think, okay, what do we want our workforce to be like? Is our whole team of engineers, are they all, white men, or do we have diversity? At what stage of our company, at 25 people, at 50 people, do we do an analysis and we make sure that we are hitting our goals? Do we want our group to look like the population of people that we're serving? So I urge founders to ask these hard questions and then reverse engineer ways that they can do this. And obviously, we are big proponents of early talent, because if you cultivate talent early, then you can find talent from diverse places. You could even bring on people to your team that don't have a 4-year degree. Like we have people on our team who never went to college. And that is an exciting transformation in the world of recruiting, because you need people with skills. You need people that can bring their A game and fit the bill. And that doesn't mean that they spent 4 years at an academic institution. So really rethink how you're recruiting and build pipelines and channels. And obviously technology is how you power some of that remote work opportunities. You can get in touch through them through different mechanisms, whether that's LinkedIn, whether that is these meetup groups, or relationships with community colleges and campuses as well.
And I think every business in every industry has an audience and a set of customers that are all so diverse and scattered all over the world. And it's so important to have that diversity of thought within the business to serve that audience, because if they're not going to be able to serve them effectively. And thankfully, we are moving away from the loudest voice in the meeting room calling the shots, and we are learning to collaborate and bring different backgrounds together there and get new solutions. But I suspect our conversation today is going to set off a few light bulb moments in business leaders and decision makers' heads right now. And they're going to be walking into the office. So for those people that are listening, feeling a little bit inspired, wanting to do something about it, can you expand on the ways that remote positions could actually feed into an overall diversity, equity, inclusion strategy?
Absolutely. That's truly our passion at Symba, because with remote, you can access so much more talent. So that means you can have a presence in places that you might not have been able to reach before. So if you're able to network and build really great relationships, we promote some of these great organizations that we work with, like Inroads and Year Up. These are amazing nonprofits that place talent from different socioeconomic backgrounds, from diverse backgrounds within organization, and give them mentorship and resources to access many of these opportunities. The second thing that we highly recommend that you do is create talent pools of remote pipelines and really understand where you are accessing talent so that you can really think open. Because as you mentioned, Neil, when you are able to collaborate and bring these different forms of thought, you are able to support your customers better, because now you can innovate. Now you can have your thought process challenged, and you can also service your customers over longer periods of times. If you are a team that's scattered throughout the US and globally, you could technically be working 24/7. So there's so many exciting aspects of having teams that are placed over different time periods, because then you can also service and be active for the customer, depending on what your customer success team is doing. So those are two really great ways. One, partner with really great organizations, and then two, build recruitment funnels that feed into that remote aspect.
And I'm so glad you mentioned the word innovate there, because so many businesses are faced with doing more with less. They're wanting to implement innovation and bring innovation teams. But of course, it is so much more than multicolored beanbags and foosball tables. So it's great to hear you bringing out these so many different reasons and strategies. But I'm curious, if we zoom out a little bit further, how does everything that you're doing here contribute to like the tenure, culture, and overall company wellness within an organization? Do you have any experience around that too?
Absolutely. I have, it's interesting. I have experience kind of both ways. I have interesting experience working with our own customers who do a lot of this. And then as a founder myself, technically, I'm like a standing HR leader, right? Where I think about the wellness. And yesterday we took off a day, and it was the International Day of Wellness, where, people spent some time thinking about their mental health and wellness. And this is coming to the top, conversations for leadership and teams, because gone are the days when employers held all of, I think the rights and responsibilities. Now, with the Great Resignation, and we've seen talent being more fluid than ever, employers really have to be thoughtful about the culture and their environment that people want to join, because otherwise people will leave. They will go and join. And, it is much easier than ever to leave an organization. And we're seeing that, now with millennials and Gen Z, the sense of loyalty has definitely changed on its head. So for employers, it's really important that you create benefits and packages and different PTO policies, and have a way of serving and listening to your people anonymously. So that's something we try to do very actively, is we do surveys where we understand and let people speak out and share their thoughts We've even done live whiteboarding sessions in team meetings that are anonymous, where people can post their comments. And let me tell you, as a founder of a business, that is very hard and gut wrenching. I hate, it's a really intense experience. The first time I did it, I was so nervous, and you get feedback that is not always easy to listen to, but that's how you grow. And that's how you break and change some of the concepts that you have to create more inclusive spaces that hopefully, continue to grow the culture. Because when a disgruntled employee mentions something that they're not happy about, and the company takes active efforts to resolve that, you are starting to build and strengthen retention for your organization. So that's something I really urge companies to do. Is you might not need to have all the answers, but start figuring out what are the questions so that you can get to the answers. And that's one thing that we highly, highly promote, is surveying and capturing this data so you can make some of those changes for your culture.
Again, such a powerful point, because I think so many people are face down in their smartphones, endlessly scrolling down social media feeds that act as a reflection of themselves and just feed their own opinions and thoughts back at them.
So true.
And as you said, that it's getting that feedback that you don't want to hear. That's the only way that you grow, isn't it?
Yes.
And I'm curious, though, a few years ago, when everything kicked off for you, you had some of the biggest companies in the world, some of the biggest tech companies as well, the likes of IBM knocking on your door, asking you for solutions, asking for your help. But what keeps you up at night? And how do you personally keep your curiosity and open-mindedness alive that helps you grow and get these new solutions and help businesses? Is there a secret on how you do that?
So I don't have any secrets on how I do that, because I think as a founder, I try to remain humble and really searching for answers. I'm always curious, asking a lot of questions, and have amazing mentors to support. But what keeps me up at night is how I think unpredictable the market and really world trends can be. I think that we've seen this in the past few years with the massive changes of remote work, and then a recession looming. And all of a sudden we saw the market for venture capital get cut in half. I think that's something that keeps me up at night, because no matter how much you can stay on your toes, we never know what's going to happen in the world. So I think just being open-minded and understanding what are the high-level trends, but also staying focused, because I think as a founder, you have this really crazy battle, right? How do we stay laser focused, but how do we listen to the bigger trends in the world that we cannot predict? So those are the things that keep me up at night. And the only way I combat it is by constantly listening and asking questions and staying very, very close to the problem area that we're solving.
Love that. And we started the podcast talking about your origin story, but now as we've come full circle, and you look back a little over the events over the last few years, what would you say the biggest lessons that you've learned from your career in tech and as a startup founder, especially for that startup founder that might be listening at the very early stage of their career? Is there any advice that you would pass down?
There's a lot of advice that I would pass down, especially to my future self.
Yeah.
But the first piece of advice I think I would say is don't listen to all advice. I think it's really, really important as a founder that you stay focused and stay in your lane on the problem that you're solving. That's the first thing I would share, is really don't let yourself get confused by listening to a lot of feedback from different areas, because it is important that you are able to weed things out and stay focused. The second thing I would say is don't do unpaid pilots, because they're difficult to learn from. Your customers are not as invested as if someone who is actually paying for a product and getting feedback. And the third thing I would say is your team is everything. Making sure that you have the right people on your team that are diverse, meaning diverse in who they are, what they bring to the team, but especially diverse in skill set, is incredibly important for the long-term success of your company. So those are 3 pieces of advice I would give to myself a few years ago.
Brilliant. And of course, well, I would say that a few of the things that really shine when talking to you today is your passion for your work, and also how humble you are. You seem to remain completely grounded throughout all your success. And of course, none of us are able to achieve success without a little help along the way. So Is there a particular person that you're grateful towards who may have helped you in some way, helped put you on this path you're on, or maybe just someone that invested a little time in you and saw something in you many, many years ago that are blissfully unaware of the impact that they had on you? Is there anyone you'd like to thank that we can give a big thank you to on the podcast today?
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to give out 2 thank yous. I think the first thank you would be to late Congressman John Lewis, who's no longer with us, because he was such a visionary and really someone that taught me when I was in the realm of the public sector that I could shift to innovation, that I could think outside the box. I think I never knew anything about startups. I thought I was going to be a career diplomat. I had one way of thinking and pushed me to be innovative, to be open-minded, and really, I think in a way saved me into an exciting space that is incredibly dynamic. And then the second thank you I would have is to Charlene, who is one of the amazing leaders of URX and an amazing talent leader in the community who I met. And I shared her the initial designs of Symba and believed in the work that we were doing from the early days. So she is currently with us, and she is leading an amazing community. But it's exciting to see women invest in other women's and uplift each other to, do great things. We need more of that, especially in the space of women in tech. So those are my 2 major thank yous. And thank you so much, Neil, for having me on this. This has been incredible.
No, thank you so much. And I just echo everything you said there. It's absolutely beautiful what you've achieved. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening, wanting to find out more information about Symba, the work that you're doing, how you might be able to help them, how they might be able to contact you, what's the best starting point for everything?
So I am incredibly active on LinkedIn. So if you message me on LinkedIn, if I don't follow up right away, I promise to do so. But LinkedIn is a really great channel, especially that's where a lot of our customers live. So follow me on LinkedIn and connect with us with Symba as well. You can check us out at symba.io, and it's SYMBA for symbiotic relationships.
Well, my next question was going to be, where did the name Symba come from? But you've answered that for me. Well, love chatting with you today. Yes, about remote internship programs, how they allow employers to access diverse talent, fill their future hiring pipeline, and also how it impacts the culture and overall company wellness. I always say technology works best when it brings people together, and everything that you're doing here is exactly that. So I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me, talk about that, and also share your inspiring story with me. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Neil. Appreciate it.
What an amazing story. And I just love discussing the ways that remote positions can feed into an overall DEI strategy and how they can contribute to the culture of an overall company wellness. And I interview so many people on this podcast. At the moment, I've got 100 guests booked in. We've got over 2,100 guests that we've interviewed. But Ahva really shined for me today, so much so that as I was talking, I was thinking of several other podcasts that I could possibly try and help get her on there, because I think these are the kind of stories that need to be shared. And if you're a tech startup founder, I think there was a big lesson there in how she was faced with having to pivot because people thought she was crazy. The concept of a remote internship program just seemed bizarre only 3 years ago. But of course, everyone's collectively realised now that it's not crazy. And I think there's a few lessons in there about sticking to your guns. But I just love how the universe gave her that little nudge in the right direction, that, hey, you're doing the right thing here. But that's today's story. And now I want to hear your story, your opinions, your insights on anything we talked about. So please email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes. We'll keep this conversation going. But a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.